Good evening. Welcome to What's So Funny, the show that probes the brains, the minds, the psyches, and all that of the people who make the funny. This week, two big-time American comedians join us. Eddie Brill and Todd Glass. They join us live on tape, or whatever the technology that iPods record on. That's where they join us. The comedy festival is all over. Are you all comedied out? I hope you caught some of the festivities around town. It was a great festival, lots to see, lots to laugh at. I'm tired. I'm pooped, you might say, if you were 78 years old. So I interviewed a couple of the comics that were here in town, and we're going to play those for you. Eddie Brill. I'm going to start off with Eddie Edward Brill from New York City. You might know him. Well, you probably don't know him, but, well, we'll let him explain exactly what he does. Here is Eddie Brill. With Eddie Brill, finally,
Yes.
Mr. Brill making an appearance on What's So Funny. I know you've been dying a long time to be on this show.
I actually have, because I always get the emails, who's on the show, and it's always a Sunday night. And what is
You're
it?
in New York?
Right, I'm always in New York because I got to get ready for work on Monday. So
Explain to the people what work is for you.
for me, I'm a stand-up comedian, but I also have a cool job at the David Letterman Show.
Yes, pretty cool job. You probably have the best job in comedy, don't you?
One of them. The best job in comedy is to be a comedian, but the coolest job is to book the comedians on the Letterman Show, because to me, he's like the Johnny Carson of our era, and it's the great artists get to be on the Letterman Show, great comedy artists, and I get to put them on the show. It's pretty nice.
How did you get that job?
It's in this business like anything. It's who you know. And Louis C.K., great comedian, was working there, and he recommended me, and I got a 6-week trial period, and I've been there 11 years. It's wonderful.
I saw you on a few weeks ago giving money to a young actress. Did you get it back?
I did. What happened is Dave was getting the girl from that movie Shampoo, not Shampoo. Hairspray. Shampoo. That was with Warren Beatty.
Yeah.
That was a great movie. In fact, my father took me to see that movie. He didn't know what it was about. He was so embarrassed because I was a little kid, and he thought that that it was like a movie he didn't want to know that he brought his kid. So he told me and my sister, he said, "You guys walk out ahead of me, and I'll meet you at the car." He was so embarrassed. But anyway, the girl was from Hairspray, and she used to sing for money. So Dave, give me some money. So I was fumbling in my pocket, and I had about $500 in my pocket.
What?
Because I had just taken money out because I was going to play cards. Plus, I always have money in case Dave needs it for the audience. Like, oh, a nice T-shirt. Let me give you the money for it or whatever. So I had about $570, so I just handed him the whole wad, and he just gave the whole thing to her instead of peeling off a 20 or something. Right. And they had to pay me back, and they weren't really happy. They said, "Why don't you give her 20?" I said, "I was quick thinking."
Oh, so she took it, and they had to pay you back. They had to reimburse you.
Yeah, they reimbursed me. He gave it to her, and then she gave it back, and they said, "No, keep it," because he's not going to take the money back from her. And I think that money is dropping the bucket for what they're making over there at CBS. So,
yeah. So you're always standing just behind Dave during the
show. I'm just to the left of Dave. Wow. Over that little spiral staircase, I get to do that. It's pretty sweet. So
you've seen some history going down on that show?
Yeah, and most of it, it's pretty tame. There's never really stories that are like, oh my God. I mean, the Farrah Fawcett story, when I first started working there, we didn't know, she was late, and she had done this video about her painting in the nude. She would throw her body into paint, and so we thought she was going to come out nude, and we were going to have to blur it. There was all these rumors about what she was going to do, and she came out, and she seemed a little bit drunk or on pills or something, and Dave handled it pretty well. But it was kind of funny. It was a really, really funny show. And then there was the time that, what's her face from Hole?
Courtney Love.
Courtney Love got on the table to reenact what...
Drew Barrymore.
Thank you very much for filling the words in. Yeah, you should be answering the questions. I should be interviewing you. So anyway, she goes on the table to take her shirt off, and I got to see that view instead of Drew Barrymore. And that wasn't very pretty. It was like, oh, put your shirt on, But, nothing's really crazy. I mean, it's kind of fun. Like one time on the show recently, everything broke down. The guy got the script wrong. Everyone was laughing, and Letterman's like, what are we doing? And blah, blah. And instead of, redoing it, they just kept it the way it was, which was kind of cool. I made a suggestion. I said, just keep it the way it is. Just edit a little bit, but keep it the way it is. And it's just bizarre, real television. So there's a lot of fun things that happen on the show like that just happen in the moment.
And you also warm up the audience ahead of time?
Yes, that I've been doing every night whenever there's a show, I get to warm up the audience. And the audience are pretty jacked up, so my job is to sort of cohese them. They're all over the place from all different parts of the world, bring them together so that when the show starts, boom, they're ready to go.
So you're there whenever there's a show being filmed. You got to be there.
I got to be there.
But you fly around the world, and you're coming here to Vancouver.
Right.
Every year,
yeah.
You go to festivals all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Your scouting talent, is that for stand-up on the show?
It's a mixture for me. I scout, like this weekend I was scouting talent and performing. I got to work, the Yucks, and I got to work at the Theater for the Performing Arts, I think it was. It was a center for performing arts.
Yeah, the best of the fest.
Yeah, it was pretty great. So I get to be a comedian, which is like I said again, my favorite part of the world. But I get to travel for Letterman. But we tape 4 days a week. We tape 2 on Monday. So I have every weekend off. Mm-hmm. We get to 10 to 12 weeks off a year, as most TV shows do, in that kind of, chat show, bracket show. And so on those weeks, that's when I go to England or I go to Australia or I come to Vancouver. Like we had this whole week off, so I was able to come here.
Sweet gig.
Yeah, and you know what? The coolest thing that's happened lately is they've been using my names in the top 10 list. Like inside jokes. Like what was Britney Spears' excuse? Because Eddie Brill said that the crowd was mostly from out of town. Which doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything to the people watching at home.
Right. But Dave's silly, and he just does silly things like that.
So do they play enough stand-up comedy on the show? Were they doing it a week? Is it a weekly event now?
When I first got the job, I had asked to do it every week, and we were doing it every week. But if the lead guest on the Friday show, because we usually have comedians on Friday, if the lead guest on the Friday show is a comedian, like Robin Williams or somebody of that nature, there's no stand-up comic on the show. So we average... the lowest we've had is 15 on the show, and the most we've had is like 30 in a year, 30, 35. It's not... it's not because we don't want to. My guess is that the ratings aren't that big for comedians that late at night because people don't want to think. If you show a band, doesn't mean the band's not great, but it's a lot easier than have to pay attention and get the material and all that other kind of stuff. So I think the show definitely uses comedians, but I think they rather have music or they rather have...
Yeah, I'd rather have comedians.
I'm right there with you.
The bands you come on and some of them are just, what are they doing?
Well,
and who are they for? For 6 people who like that kind of music.
Right. Well,
that's my bias.
Right, and but that's the beautiful thing because in the business, you're going to have 100 bands, and there might be 40 that you don't like, but you get 60 that you like.
Yeah.
With comedians, I only have a few, so I've got to get it right. And my job is pretty much to make Letterman laugh, to find the comedians I know Letterman would laugh at. And that's what I look out there for.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what is the difference between the comedians you'd find on Letterman as opposed to Conan, as opposed to Leno?
Well, I'll tell you this about Conan. Conan really puts on great comedians. Mm-hmm. Conan's a very good show, and they're really smart, and they have great writers, and Conan's just really brilliant at what he does. And they have great comics on the show, so it's not like there's a difference from our crowd. Maybe they'll let them be a little... dirtier, maybe. See, because a lot of people think dirty is edgy, but really smart is edgy. And we don't want middle of the road comics on Letterman. We want the artists, the one of a kind guys and girls who really, they do that art piece, the Jim Gaffigans and the Jake Johanssons and the Brian Regans and the Dwayne Kennedys, and those are the people. And then also I bring in the Carlins and the Cosbys and the Seinfelds and the Ellens, all to do stand-up, which is the art that's kind of like falling off. So I'm trying to bring that art back to television by getting those people to do stand-up on the show.
Well, you mentioned these names, and these are all pretty big names in stand-up. Now, I imagine when you're going around to England and Vancouver, and you're going to the Canadian Comedy Awards later in a few weeks, I guess.
Yeah, in October, middle of October.
You're not going to see these people. So you're going to see real unknowns. Now, is there ever a chance that an unknown will make it onto David Letterman?
Usually I've been averaging at least 3 unknowns a year. Like a few years ago, Bill Burr was kind of an unknown, and now he's done really incredibly well ever since he's done his Letterman. He's got an HBO special, and he's doing really, really well. Not that we broke him, but we found him before other people kind of found him. I mean, I know he did Conan, he did some of these shows, but he wasn't ready at that time, and I watched him, and I knew him. But there's like a guy like Roy Wood Jr., 27-year-old comic from Alabama, that no one would ever really find, but we found him, and he was smart, and he was funny, and he made everyone laugh. And then Nick Griffin has been just signed with Worldwide Pants, the guy that we put on every year. He's just smart and this one-of-a-kind comedian. So each year I find at least 3, maybe more, new people to throw in as well, because we want. There's a certain thing. If you're doing comedy 2 or 3 years, you don't have the poise, you don't have the wherewithal and the material yet to really shine. And I think it takes a few more years than that. So I'll find a kid 2-3 years. Like I'll find a kid, like I found Rob Pugh a few years ago in Vancouver. I think this guy is really sharp and really funny. And with a few years experience in getting his stage legs under him and more material in writing, eventually I'll be able to put Rob Pugh, hopefully, on the Letterman show.
So it's a long process. When you come out and you scout, maybe do some comics think, I'm going to get on right away?
Some do, but most don't. And then, the process is a process. I remember when they told me I got the show, like 14 months later, I was on the show. It's an interesting process. And for me, I don't like when you find a comic who's kind of young. Like I was just at the party talking to some guy, Ben Glebe comic, and he's a pretty funny guy. But you see all the rookie mistakes and the young things he's doing, but he's really eager to learn because he really wants everything. So I spend time with him, and I really am honest with him. And it doesn't mean I'm a genius and I know all the answers, but I have a perspective, and I'm able to tell him some of those sort of shortcuts or what we're looking for and what he should be doing if he wants to get to a certain level.
And they can maintain their own voice. I mean, you're not trying to make them into a clone of somebody, right?
That's the whole thing. We're trying to find there's so many of the same rhythms out there. Mm-hmm. It's almost like music. We're looking for that soul singer guy, that Ray Charles guy or girl in comedy who's out there making their own music, just really one of a kind. And also intelligent, because there's a lot of comics don't realize that vulnerability is really a strength in comedy. If you find a thread through all the great comedians of all time, especially Pryor, why he's considered probably the number one comic of all time, or Carlin right up there, it's that vulnerability, that strength that you get from saying, not everybody sucks, you suck, it's we suck, and I suck just as bad as you guys, and let's laugh at it. And you can be talking about one end of the spectrum and be dirty and toilet humor or whatever, and you can talk about really intelligent stuff with politics, or dirty stuff about politics, or intelligent stuff about going to the bathroom. As long as it's your voice. And here's another thing. I'm just, so many things are going through my head. People say, how do I find my voice? Well, you don't find your voice. You just you let yourself be yourself. Because, I can tell you expressions you make, and you can tell me what I make, but I don't realize what I make unless I videotape myself doing a comedy show and watch what I'm doing. And if I want to be a great performer, it's just not words, because words are only one form of communication. The one thing about this interview, you can't see me moving my hands, you can't see me foreshadowing what I'm going to say because my eyes open. But those are important things to write when you're writing in comedy.
So you're writing the actions as well, or you're
in a sense you're feeling them. You feel it's like a math equation. You feel the rhythms and you know how to get to them, and the rhythm has to be who you are.
Is this true also in the so-called alternative movement, where it seems more slacker, we're coming out searching for words instead of having like I'm doing right now.
Well, I was doing it before, and you were helping me, and I'm not helping you because I'm thinking of the answer to this one. There's a lot of great alternative comics. I mean, just really brilliant comedians who just go out there and sling it. Mark Maron is so great at it, and he's just really, really funny and smart, and Greg Proops and all these guys, and Patton Oswalt. They're so good. And then there's people, I'm not going to mention names, who just go out there and they do pot jokes, or they do, it just becomes really simple, easy jokes. And to me, it's not alternative. What would make it alternative, it was really who they were. They're really pot guy, and that's who they are, and that's their voice, and that's who they are. But, when you take the easy subjects, to me, it's not alternative. For me, alternative is, and it's interesting because there shouldn't be a separate scene of alternative comics. It should all be comics who are, alternatively who they are, and you should get the sort of middle of the road people out, but that's never going to happen.
You also, when you travel around, you do these workshops with young comics and
the comics of not only young comics, comics young and old, because a lot of people.
And this isn't to prepare them for Letterman. This is just to help them in their careers.
Yeah, because what happens is in our comedy business, we're really good to each other, and there was a guy tonight, and I won't mention his name, on the Best of the Fest, and no one saw his set. We're all downstairs chatting with each other, and he came down, everyone, hey, great set, and we're all like that. It's not that we're BSing these people, but we're not really telling the truth. We didn't see your set, and we're saying nice set. But here's a chance to really be honest and to have a workshop. You can't teach comedy. If someone says, I'm going to teach you to be funny, they're lying, they're taking your money. You can't teach comedy. You have it or you don't. But what you can do is be eyes and ears for each other. And by helping other people, you help yourself, because you learn a lot from teaching. So these workshops, I've got it down to a formula where we really work hard, and it's really the place where everyone can leave their ego at the door, and everyone can really play and really goof off on stage, then really be honest with each other. and really tell someone, hey, why are you doing this? It looks like you're nervous. Get your hands out of your pocket. Stop holding onto the mic stand for dear life. You just took your hand out. They didn't see how funny that was. The other thing that you do is a lot of times people do the setups after the punchline. And it's like, why are you doing that? But people don't know it. Yeah. Because no one's told them. No one's been honest with them. But your peers, if they're honest with you, then you get a chance to take it in and go, well, that hurts for a little bit, but then look, that's why I did a workshop so I can find out the truth.
Yeah, nobody likes criticism, but it's constructive. You're not just going, no, you suck.
No, and why would you have to respect people who are going to do a workshop, because they're people who care about it enough to get up early in the morning to go up there because they care about their comedy so much. So even if they're never going to be a great comic, you got to respect them for trying it, or at least there's a lot of people out there who just slide through everything in life, and there are some people who they really care. So you got to respect them, and you got to give them constructive criticism. You don't say get out of the business, because those are the kind of people, actually, you tell them to get out of the business, they're the ones who'll make it, because they go, that bastard told me to get out of the business, and I'm going to show him, and sometimes that works.
Sometimes you want to say get out of the business, so don't you be honest?
No. You know what?
Really?
In a sense, there are people who are really successful, and I almost want to say get out of the business. Come on, you're a box of cereal. You have a
what
pretty.
Does that mean?
To me, a box of cereal is really nice on the outside. Marketing is all on the outside, but inside it's just a bunch of stuff without nutrients.
For those people at home, we're not in the studio, we're out on the street. That's why that car didn't just start its engine here in this studio. We're outside.
Yeah, when I end my interviews, I usually just jump in a car and go. And I bring it right up to the studio, not that we have to end it. I'm just waving Paul Meyerhog, who did very well.
Hey, thank you.
Have a good night.
No name dropping, please.
Oh, I did.
Now, was it before Letterman that you were voted top comic in New York?
There's the MAC Award, which is done by your peers. It's a cabaret world. And it's, dancers, singers, jazz artists, comedians. There's all different categories. And for 3 years in a row, I was voted, the number one guy, which is weird because there's no number one comedian.
Sure.
There are, Chris Rock is 10,000 times the comic I'll ever be. You wish you could be as good as him. But it's a nice accolade because it's your friends. It's your peers, not your friends, your peers who are saying, hey, we think this guy's really funny. So that's all that really is. But I didn't take it. I used it as a credit for a long time, but now I don't even really. Because it was kind of cool to say. But now it's like, you know what? That was a long time ago. And, let's not say someone's better than another person or you win this award. Just go, when you give an intro, just go up there. Say the next guy from New York, from Letterman or whatever, Eddie Brill, and then boom, boom, boom.
Who are you got to go?
Soon. You're leaving now? Okay. How much more time do we have?
Well, we got if you got to go, I have one question, though.
Okay.
I want to know who your role models, your comedic role models.
George Carlin was my hero.
Was he?
He was. I saw him on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I said, oh, my God, that's the guy who thinks like me, or I think like him. And I remember running out to the store to buy the album that he was plugging on The Tonight Show, FM and AM, his album. So what happened was they didn't have it, and every day I went back, and I was bugging them, and they finally said, look, give us your number. We'll call you when it comes in. They called me. I memorized every word on the album. I would do it for my friends, and I knew every word of the album. I can almost know them all right now, but that's a lot of time. But anyway, so all these years and years later, I did Letterman. I did a really good set that was smart, and I was really enjoying it. And the show got a call from Carlin going, he saw a guy on television he really liked. He wants a copy of his tape. So it's the biggest circle of incredibleness that's ever happened, that here's the guy who I was dying for his tape or album. He came and asked me for a copy, and then I got to meet him, and he said, I love your comedy, and my brother loves you, and whenever you're on TV, please let us know so we can watch you. And that's my hero.
Wow, that's got to be something.
Yeah.
Eddie Brill, you've taken top New York comic off your resume, but now you can add guest on What's So Funny.
Yes, I'll put that right in there. I'll be very happy. It was really good to see you.
Nice
as
to
always.
see you.
Take care, guy.
Thanks.
Be well.
Hi, this is Todd Glass, and you're listening to What's So Funny on CFRO 102.7 FM. Okay? That's what you're doing. Now you know it. But you didn't know it before I told you. Hi, this is Todd Glass. You're listening to What's So Funny. Really? Big fucking deal. All right. Here we go. This is Todd Glass. You're listening to What's So Funny on CFRO 102 FM. 102.7 FM. I fucked that up. There we go. Hey, you're listening to the radio, all right? You know what you're doing. Why do you need me? You don't even know who I am. I'm Todd Glass. And then you're like, oh, who's that? It's supposed to be like someone famous that says this. Who the fuck's this guy? Okay.
Who is that guy? That was Todd Glass, obviously. And I spoke with Todd, obviously, because we got him to do a little promo there. Did I just sound like Graham Clark? Unintentional. And speaking of Graham Clark, Todd Glass toured with Graham Clark, John Bueller, and Phil Hanley all around Vancouver and the island area, and we talk a bit about that. When I saw him, he hosted a show down at the Media Club for 3 nights during the festival. It was called Todd Glass Knows Best. And it was just essentially, that's the beauty of the Comedy Fest, is if you don't get into one show, you can see the same comics at other venues. And so it was a chance to see the top headliners at the Media Club stretching out, doing, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And Todd Glass hosted that. You've seen Todd Glass on Last Comic Standing. That's the name of the show, Last Comic Standing. That was the year, I do believe, Alonzo Bowden won. Anyway, we talk about that and other things here, now, that interview with Mr. Todd Glass from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Todd Glass. Todd, I hear you know best.
Yes, I don't know how they came up with that name. But I guess I do know best, I think.
Are you booking the comics on this show?
No, I'm not. They just put some... I mean, you saw the lineup here, so it's pretty easy to... guys like Dave Cross and Kindler and Odenkirk and Doug Benson and Jimmy Pardo and Paul Tompkins, and you figure, I'm probably pretty safe with getting a good show.
You kind of know the area. You were here last year at the festival, and I saw you open for
Spade.
David Spade.
Yeah.
And you were touring with some local comics, Graham Clark.
Graham, and then John Bueller.
Right.
And then, who's the third guy? Do you remember his name?
Was it Todd Allen? Or?
No, I would remember. I feel bad. I saw him yesterday, and I just drawn a blank to his name. But I was telling Jimmy Pardo, and I was like, usually when you're on the road and there's one funny guy, you're happy. But they were all... I did some island, and there was those 3 guys.
Some island. I'm from that island.
What was the island?
Vancouver Island.
No, I don't know if it was that.
Oh, really?
It was,
a tiny little island.
Yeah, really little island. We flew, literally, we landed on in the water, if I say it correctly. Water is what I normally say. And but the 3 guys were Phil
Hanley.
Phil Hanley. There we go. Phil, John, and Graham. I was like, Jesus, 3 funny guys. There must be something in the water here at... in Vancouver.
So how did that tour come about? Obviously, people just...
That was like a first-time promoter, and he went and saw some shows here, and then picked 3 guys from here to open the show, and then picked me from Los Angeles. So it just sort of all came about. But we had fun. It was fun hanging out.
Yeah.
Sort of my favorite thing to do.
Is that why you come to a festival like this, where you get all these great names, and it's more of a hang, right? Yeah.
I think there's 2 types of festivals. One is for the people in the city, and they're all for the people in the city, but sometimes they're industry heavy in the audience. Mm-hmm. I prefer, obviously it's nice when industry comes out and they happen to see you, but it's a little easier to perform for, just people coming into the show. But the festivals are fun. I think the most fun about them is that, when you're headlining, your friends are headlining mostly, so you don't get a chance to work with your friends. So this, I'm not going to be on a show with Paul or Jimmy or any of those guys. And then hanging out at the hotel at the end, that's always the best part of the night.
Yeah, it's really all-star cast every show that you do.
Yeah, there's some great shows. I mean, the guy's got, he's got good taste. Some of the other festivals, you see the lineup, you're like, ee. But Will's got some good taste.
I saw you in Montreal a few years ago, and you were pitching a show about you in a coma.
Yeah,
which I thought was hilarious.
Oh man, what a long that show has taken the longest course. Like the 30-second version is about 8 years ago. I had the idea for a guy in a coma. By the way, I should say this for the record. I have since moved on and trying to work on another show. Just because I don't, it's a funny idea, and maybe later in my life I'll be able to sell it. But it's had its chance. It didn't sell, and so 8 years ago I shot my own pilot. Just with my own camera, and got some pretty cool people to do cameos. I got Ray Romano and Ben Stiller, Fred Willard, who's the president of A&M Records. The Tijuana Brass. It's
Herb Albert.
Herb Albert. Even Herb Albert did a little cameo, and it was apropos for Herb Albert. He was a nurse in the hospital, and he denied being Herb Albert. People were like, "You look like..." He goes, "Well, I'm not, so therefore what I'm doing is not sad because I never was a musician." And people go, "You look like Herb Albert." And then I shot it, and then tried to sell it, and didn't have a lot of luck. And at that point, I said to myself, "You know what? It's time to put it to rest." The only way that I would want to go forward with it, if someone very legitimate came forth and said, yeah, I want to do this show, and then Adam Sandler's production company wanted to do the show, and I thought can't get any bigger than that, and we shot a pilot with TBS, and they spent a good chunk of money, and it didn't sell, so I thought, all right, it's time now to just move on to something else. But it was shooting the pilot. Although I would have definitely wanted the show to sell, it was a great opportunity, and it was a great experience.
Sad though.
Yeah,
they have that kind of limited vision or something. I remember the comments were saying, "Well, we don't want you just lying in bed."
Well, that's the one that made me so angry because you can't argue if somebody says I don't think it's funny. You might disagree, but that's their opinion, and there's no arguing that. But I remember at the festival when I affectionately tried to yell at people for that. We think you're funny, but we think that's a waste of you laying in the bed. I'm like, are you shitting me? You get the concept of the show that they have flashbacks, that people say, well, the way I met Todd was, and it leads to a 30-second flashback or a minute flashback, and that tells the story of how people met me in the coma. And the other thing was, I always thought with a sketch show, which I thought this was a good vehicle, it was basically a sketch show in a way. There was the sitcom element of it, obviously when people are in the hospital, but the sketch element was people's memories of me. And I always, when you watch Saturday Night Live, you always think, when it is funny, you're like, oh, they went on too long. It should have ended. Sometimes a sketch can be 20 seconds, 10 seconds. You're in, it's funny, and get out.
Right.
And that was a great vehicle for that. Someone could be like, I met Todd at the airport. He was sneaking on the plane, acting like he was in a wheelchair. Bang, you cut to it. It's funny. Bang, right back to the hospital.
Right.
In, out. There's an in, there's an out. And so, one day, hopefully it'll get to do it. But for now, I'm moving on to some other stuff. Because this is 10 years now about 8 or 10 years trying to do something with that show.
What other stuff are you moving on to?
I have a show that I'm working on right now. It's called Todd Glass Saves America. And it's, it's sort of me in everyday life just trying to go around and deal with, I guess the best way to explain it, and I better get better at explaining than this or it's never going to sell. It's sort of like in stand-up. You know how you'll have a problem and you'll talk about it on stage. It could be as simple as, what's the problem with Home Depot? Why can't you get help there? Or how come when you ever get off an elevator? And in this show, I go do something about it. I do the research. Yeah, why does that happen? Why can't Home Depot have people in every aisle instead of people saying, this is not my aisle, it's not my section?
Yeah.
So it's sort of just like, a mixture. I always say it's like Michael Moore, with the passion of Michael Moore, but with just everyday problems. Companies that have those voice-activated things that are computers and answer the phone that is just, makes you want to pull your hair out. To go to the company and go, are you aware that nobody wants to talk to your fucking computer? That you want to pull your hair out? So it's called Todd Glass Saves America, so I'm working on that.
So documentary feel. And it's kind of like your stand-up. You get upset at the little things in life rather tackling the big philosophical issues.
Yeah, it's not really anything political. It could be a segment called, hey, why are you bringing your baby on a plane when it's 4 months old? Not because the crying will annoy me, because that's a little shallow to have that worry you, but why are you putting your baby through this? Just and people, because I didn't think that till one of the producers that's working on the show with me said that. He's like, or showrunner, and I'm like, why do people bring their babies on? I'd love to know why are you putting your baby through this at 3 months old? Stay home,
Right. I took her 8 months.
8 months? Did it? Well, I don't know.
Didn't cry once.
Okay,
Didn't cry once.
I was on a plane once, and although when a baby cries, it's not enjoyable, but it's less enjoyable for the baby. And
sure.
I looked back and I could not believe it, and they were putting like a towel over the baby's mouth, and it was so wrong that I thought before I jumped up and said, hey, you can't do that, I turned to the guy next to me and I go, you can't do that, right? He goes, not for long. And I'm like, okay. And I went over, I said, hey, it's all right. You don't got to, poor baby.
Oh, that's disturbing.
I know that.
Yeah.
It's a good story to tell in the middle of an interview about someone trying to suffocate their baby. Basically, that's the gist of it.
I sympathize with babies crying on planes because I always feel like crying, but I'm an adult and I can't do it. I'm not a good flyer.
I think everybody wants to cry after 9/11.
Exactly. How did you start out in stand-up, and has your act developed or evolved so it's completely unrecognizable, or are you essentially the same guy?
No, I hope I've morphed into a better comedian. I know I'm talking serious about comedy. I always try to preface it because from over the years listening to Howard Stern, and that thing whenever the whenever they're interviewing gets a little boring, or they play tapes of people being interviewed and then, shut up, and they start snoring. So I hope this is somewhat interesting. But I started in Philadelphia in about '85, and there was a comedy club there that had an open mic night, and I went up, and it was a while before I knew what good comedy was, and that's the only thing, thank God, I knew what good comedy was, because before I was even doing it, and I'm not saying I'm the best comic in the world, but I strive to be a decent comic, I would know when the guys came through, like Richard Lewis or Gilbert Godfrey or whoever they were, when the audience didn't react to them and I did better with my shit that I was doing, and people would come afterwards and go, hey, you were better. And thank God I knew I wasn't. I just knew that they thought I was better because my simple comedy that was easy for them to digest. But I knew what good comedy was, and I sort of worked to be a better comic. It just took a little time for me. And
you were one of the highlights for me in many seasons of Lowlights on Last Comic Standing.
I had fun. I had fun doing Last Comic Standing. I hesitantly did it. I thought, you're always like if Star Search came back, a lot of comics, oh, am I too big for that? Or, I know I'm not a household name, but have I passed the point of, but my friends were like, do it. It was a great experience. I didn't get into any of the, the dynamics of, what do they call that, the alliances or anything. I just said, look, I'm going to go on, I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to be like when I hang out with my comedian friends. And it was great. At comedy clubs, I hope I go to another point in my career, but at comedy clubs, it changed it pretty dramatically. To go in there now on a night, and when there's more of an audience coming out to see you. So I was very glad that I did Last Comic Standing. It was very good for my career.
You had a bit of an alliance with the former Vancouver girl, Bonnie McFarlane?
Yeah, well, alliance in the sense that we hung out together, but we didn't, try, we're going to vote this person off. And, seeing Bonnie leave the house was like her and Gary Goldman were my go-to people to just, have some serenity in that house. And when I got, so Bonnie gets voted off first, and then you have to go to a hotel and sequester. What's that? Is that the right word? Sequester you, because if you supposedly go back out to the world, they know you lost. Or why were you?
Right.
So I got back, and Bonnie saw me, and she was crying, and she gave me a big hug. She said, I'm so glad that it's you that got knocked off. She goes, oh, it sounds wrong. I go, no, I know what you mean. If you have to sit in a hotel for another 3 weeks, you may as well do it with someone you like. So we smoked pot and watched TV, and things got better.
What do these kind of competitions mean? And it's good.
The Last Comic Standing?
Yeah.
If you can get on TV and get people see you're funny, that's why when they turn on, a big thing on those reality shows is they turn the camera on you and they do these, what I call the interviews. It's set up and they there you go. And they ask you questions. I try not to get caught up in, what I'm doing now is talking seriously about comedy. Yeah. I notice a lot of those people get caught up in when they're doing the interviews. Well, if I make it, what I'm going to do, and if I make it, if I win. You know what? Just be funny. Because you might not be here next week.
Yeah.
So I just tried to, be funny and have a good time.
Does it make you hate audiences?
No.
They tend to always choose.
Oh, you mean the public? Well, you go on there knowing that the masses and anything are not going to, like Bonnie I think Bonnie's hilarious.
Yeah.
And that the masses are probably not going to appreciate Bonnie because Bonnie's funny.
Yeah.
And people might hear this and go, what are you saying, the masses are stupid? Yes. But you have to remember this, and this is the hard part. And there's also a percentage of people that really get comedy, just like people get music. Mm-hmm. So you perform for them. And even though that night in that theater, that audience might not be appreciating what you do, you're just sort of hoping that there's some audience out there. Well, what I love about that show is that, everybody else did what they thought they had to do, and some of the women were very catty with Bonnie and just horrible. And killed every night, did better than her in front of that audience. But out of the whole thing, when it was all over, Bonnie got an hour special out of it for HBO, and I was like, fucking yes. Good. I hope they're sitting in there going, great. You thought what you were doing was so great. And,
right.
Bonnie shined.
So industry sees it. But you don't want to just
sometimes
play to the back of the room, do you?
No, you know what I think?
I think appeal somewhat to the masses.
Yeah, I think, obviously, I think everything is, I say this, in the middle. I said this on the radio the other day. I worked with a comedian once, and he goes, I'm not one of those comedians that makes the other comedians laugh. I'm like, well, maybe you should work a little harder at it. Because, I don't want to be a comedian that just makes the other comedians laugh. I want to have some of the audience. I want the audience to laugh too. But if I'm not making some comedians laugh, I'm going to go back. I'm going to think, what am I doing wrong? Mm-hmm. Not every comedian has to think you're funny. But if no good comedians think you're funny, maybe you should. Unless you don't care, but I care. my main goal is to make a living doing this, and also people that I respect, that they think I'm funny too, and then I manage to do both.
Are you in the camp that slams people like Dane Cook?
You know what? I don't know. Like, I don't slam Dane Cook, or I just know that I want to be more. If it's whoever it is going to be, if it's Dane Cook, if it was whoever it is, I want to be around for a long time. I want to be like I love stand-up comedy. It sounds a little cheesy, but I love it, and I want to be doing comedy when I'm 70. I want to be like Don Rickles, these guys that just transcend generations. And Don Rickles, if you're a comedian and you're 20, you love Don Rickles. You get it. And I don't want to be a phase. So only time will tell. And I know one thing for sure. I do not want to be popular for 5 years and fall off the face of the planet. So, and I think that comes from respecting your audience, because otherwise your audience outgrows you. Without naming anybody, let's say Andrew Dice Clay, people were like, eventually your audience outgrows you unless you treat them with respect and they grow with you.
Right.
Bill Cosby grew with his audience over the years. As they got older, he got more mature, talked about different things. So the same audience will still like him. They're not going, oh my God, remember when we wore these jeans? Or remember when we thought he was funny?
Yeah.
So just respect your audience. And when I saw again, I know I'm talking so serious about comedy, and I just had like 15 Red Bulls. When I see someone like Mitch Hedberg, or I worked with Dave Cross about 2 years ago at the Irvine Improv, and I watched his audience leaving, and they were so smart and so intelligent, and I thought, if this is what it takes to get that audience, I'll wait the wait. I don't want to have an audience I hate. Like, even guys that, without mentioning names, they hate their audience because they're, besides the act that they do, maybe they're funny they're deep down they're funnier than that, and they've chose to do this act publicly. I don't want to hate my audience. I like when I seriously, I remembered so specifically Dave Cross. The audience would leave and they would come up to you, and you're like, these are people I want to talk to. Like, if they like Dave Cross or if they like Mitch Hedberg, well, then we have something in common. And I'm happy to sit at a bar with you and talk to you for half an hour about comedy, because obviously you get comedy. So, there,
You mentioned Don Rickles. Are there any others that you grew up where you just
Rodney, Don Rickles, and guys now, there's so many of them. That's why when people make fun of comedians without naming names, and people go, "Oh, you're just jealous."
Yeah.
Wait, I say, no, I'm not. If I was jealous, I'd be jealous of Chris Rock. In other words, there's comedians that are doing 30 times better than me that I'm in awe of. So I have the ability to see good comedy. I don't, jealousy doesn't just take over. But even at this festival, like, guys like Doug Benson and Paul Tompkins and Jimmy Pardo and Odenkirk and Cross and everybody. They're just great comics.
Would you call that part of the alternative scene? I know they hate that word.
You know what? The only reason they do is because every scene, I think all they call it now is good comedy.
Yeah.
It's just good comedy. And yeah, every scene has its hack, and I guess the hack of the alternative scene is someone that doesn't really have punchlines, didn't put a lot into it. But the good comedians in the, quote, alternative scene were comedians that have been on the road, like all the names I just mentioned, Paul and Doug and all those guys that have great shows. But I think it happened, and again, in my head, I think I see it so clear. There was a period when comedy had run its course for a certain audience, and they tried, and the audiences got dumber and dumber that were coming out the clubs, and so there was a scene in LA that started putting up their own shows. Hey, there's a bar and they have a back room. We'll do a show in there. And you see guys like Tenacious D back then would perform there, and Janine Garofalo, and back then even Paul and Doug, and it was and the crowd that came out was really smart because they were given smart comedy, and so that's how it got called the alternative scene.
Yeah,
but
there's more alternative venues, I guess.
Yeah, right. That's probably a good way of putting it. Alternative to just. But that doesn't mean that all club comedians are good, because there's a lot of guys that work just mainstream clubs that are, and now it's just morphed, and it's this. When somebody says to me, "Oh, that's the alternative scene," I go, "Oh, shut up! It's just good comedy. It's that simple."
But you can do that. They just want labels, or genre. You don't just say that's music. You say that's jazz, or that's bebop, or that's
right. They want to be able to label it, but at the end of the day, like it's just good comedy. People come out to see it. Those audiences are great. But, it's like, that's what I learned a long time ago. I used to think cities were smart, but I realized it's not cities that are smart. It's comedy clubs. If every city that has a smart audience, all you have to do is to figure out. You go to a club, like let's say the Acme Comedy Club in Minneapolis. You go, oh my God, these audiences are great. Look up on the wall of who he books, and you'll be able to say that's why they're great. Look up on the wall. Oh, there they are. There's Maria Bamford. There's Paul Tompkins. There's and you go, that's why the audience is smart. And I don't care if there's 10 million people in a city. All you need is 200 a night to come out.
Right.
So if you book a good show, the smart. I saw Mitch Hedberg, before he died in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or somewhere like that, and it was a Sunday night, 2 shows. They were brilliant, the audiences, just there and quiet and attentive and hanging on every word he say. In Tulsa, Oklahoma. So just book good comedy and smart people come out. You book dumb comedy, dumb people come out.
Yeah, you eventually weed out, if you're booking good comics, you eventually weed out those that just want the whatever it is.
Right. But I think for a while, like, people thought alternative comedy was like disrespect for the audience, just making the comedians laugh. No, that's not true. It's just like, my brother said it long story real short, when me and my brother were 16 and 17, we used to go to this place called the Comedy Works where I started, and we'd see acts like Gilbert and Kevin Meaney and acts that you couldn't see the joke coming. You couldn't see the joke coming. And then for a while you can watch a comedian and then when my brother hadn't seen good comedy for a long time, because Philadelphia had really just horrible shows, and they finally opened up a great club in Philly called Helium, and they're bringing in all these great guys. And my brother goes, holy shit. It's like, oh my God, this is like in '84 when we used to go see shows. Like, I can't think of what these guys are thinking. And then you could see comedians that are like, yeah, they're funny, but sort of funny like my uncle's funny,
Exactly. Just sort of humorous.
Yeah. I know it sounds very cliche, but you remember when you watch a comedian, you're like, even me, when I watch a great comedian, I think, how the fuck did he think of that? Like, where did he connect that and that? And that's why you're laughing, and that's why you're sitting there and you're just, hype, you're just laughing and you're sweating because it's so funny. That's not too much to ask for comedy. That's like, you just, good comedians. It's as simple.
Element of surprise.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Todd Glass, thank you so much.
Thank you. We're shaking hands, everybody.
Todd Glass, love the enthusiasm. Could have sat and talked to him for an hour. And if any of these comics had stayed overnight on a Sunday night, maybe we would have had a chance. Last year we got Mark Maron and Janine Garofalo. They were the only 2 who stayed overnight. And we got them in the studio this year. We're going to have to tell Will Davis to book the festival through to Monday, or at least Sunday. Well, there you have it. I had fun tonight. Even though there was no guest in studio, probably the most fun I've had without a guest in the studio. Thanks to Eddie Brill, Todd Glass. That's it. What's So Funny's over for another week. But we'll be back in a week's time, 11 o'clock, next Sunday night. Darcy Michael will be our guest, I do believe. So tune in for that. Good night, everybody.